This is the downstairs bedroom. This would have been Vachel's parents' bedroom, the room in which Vachel and all 4 of his younger sisters were born. Vachel's father, being a doctor, was one of the earlier supporters of the germ theory, years before it was acceptable. Vachel's mother was a very talented painter herself. She painted all of the oil paintings in the house, and that's actually, she drew that herself. That's 2 of Vachel's younger sisters. He referred to himself as a rhymer designer. So when he wasn't writing the poetry, which was a very small part of what he left behind in the world, he was a brilliant illustrator. He was sort of an architect, though his buildings required like huge, enormous flowers to replace walls and things, so none of them were ever built. But basically, if Vachel saw something that needed improving in the world, he would set out to improve it in his own special way. Vachel was certainly an eccentric person. For that reason, people either really loved him and saw this brilliance that just naturally spilled out of everything, out of him, or they were really turned off by him and even kind of afraid. I mean, when he performed, he'd throw his hands up in the air and his eyes would roll back in his head, and he'd just belt out those poems. It freaked people out. Vachel Lindsay's teacher and a friend to his whole family was a woman named Susan Wilcox. This one has a whole bunch of Susan Wilcox's unpublished poetry in it. Eventually, I would like to kind of compile all of this into an actual book that you can actually hand out to people, and none of this has ever been published. Vachel now is really only remembered for being a poet, which is a real shame because that wasn't really his focus. His focus was illustrations. And he actually said if there's ever a picture and a poem, the picture is what came to his mind first. So if there's ever a picture, this is the Tree of the Laughing Bells, and the original is down at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. It's 6 or 7 feet tall, it's huge. But that picture inspired the poem, The Tree of the Laughing Bells, and this was actually one of the handouts that he'd give to people in exchange for room and board when he was walking across the country getting to know the people and the land. He was Springfield's first do-it-yourself artist. He would think something up, write it down, or draw out this big illustration, and then he'd run down the street to what is now recognized as the Lincoln Herndon Law Offices, and when Vachel was alive, there was a printer in there, and he'd have all these copies printed up on his father's dime, and then hand them out in the streets. There are a lot of art communities in Springfield now, and they all could draw from Vachel's life. I mean, Vachel spent his entire life believing that Springfield was this paradise, that Springfield had what it took to improve itself. So this bedroom was the bedroom Vachel occupied for most of his life until he moved away. This is his drawing desk right here overlooking the governor's mansion. When Vachel was younger, John Peter Altgeld was the governor and one of Vachel's heroes, and he took great pride in being able to see over his yard. This is Vachel's writing desk. The writing desk is original, the typewriter is not. The typewriter was donated from a local antique shop, but it is the same make and model that Vachel had. Vachel wrote with the Spencerian system of penmanship, which is really loopy and elegant, and basically this was how Vachel sent his first manuscript to his publisher Macmillan, and in response to that they sent him this Oliver typewriter. I poured over all of his mother's journals, which actually spill off of the pages and onto the walls. There's a room in the back of the house that she's covered in notes, and when they started renovating, they pulled away all this wallpaper and found them still on the walls. But I've got sort of this urge to preserve Vachel, so I collect stuff that I find because I'm afraid that if it goes to somebody else, they're not going to take care of it and it'll be gone, and that'll just be another part of Vachel that gets washed away. He had this like way of depicting the Midwest the way it was, and that's kind of how I started writing, just writing about the Midwest. Well, I published 5 chapbooks and then self-distributed them. I'd go like, say I was in like California in the Bunker Hill neighborhood, I'd figure out whatever their arts and culture newspaper was, and I'd find that rack and I'd slip them in. So people would come get this newspaper and then find me in there. And eventually that led to my book deal. So now I just, earlier in the year, published a nationally distributed book. I was 11, the first time I ever came in this house, and I'm 26 now. So it's been like 15 years that I've dedicated to Vachel and Lindsay. And I just developed this love, this almost like brotherly love for Vachel Lindsay. It doesn't matter where I am in the country, somehow somebody finds me to tell me about their experience with Vachel Lindsay, or I'll find a broadside for sale at some garage sale in Rochester, New York. It's he's out all over the world, just kind of in the periphery of all of these communities.